Yes. So Jesse Allen.
Yeah, yes.
Niels Valentino.
Niels Valentino. And then
Scott Peters.
Peters and
Sarah Kovac.
okay.
Is there an agenda out there?
Should be. Is there one you?
Jesse
No.
Allen.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Niels. Nice to meet you.
It's a lot easier to
Worked with Scott for a long time.
This guy.
conduct the meeting.
No,
Oh,
as an agenda.
Oh, Henry. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Took his place. Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Yeah, yeah, he's
on the agenda.
he's
Yeah,
retired.
it'll be at the top of the
Talked to him
packet.
the other day.
And Scott Chapman.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, we got a few.
I didn't hear back from Scott.
All right. It is March 27th, 2025. I call the Cottonwood Heights City Architecture Review Commission meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is item 1.1. Oh, by the way, it is 6:06. Item 1.0, welcome acknowledgements. Does anybody have any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest that they need to disclose? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2.0, business item. 2.1, project ZTA-24-005, where the commission will review, I think it's for a certificate of design compliance consideration of a request by Rockworth Companies for a zoning text amendment to modify portions of the adopted plan development district ordinance, which governs the Rockworth gravel pit site at 6695 South Wasatch Boulevard. The proposed modifications relate to further defining the massing and density of the future mixed-use project at this site. That turn time over to staff for staff report.
Thank you. This is kind of an interesting request. First of all, it's good to meet with the ARC again. It's been a little while. It's always good when we get to meet. But I'm going to start by giving just some background context to this project. Those of you that have been on the ARC for a number of years, yeah,
I should have first, can you introduce staff?
Of course.
Introduce staff here.
yes. So we have Ian Harris. He's our planner 2 with the city. We have planner 3, I'm sorry, planner 3. We have Kate, who's here in a city recorder role, and then Alex with IT support.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. So this is the project that's related to the northern gravel pit property. The ARC, for those of you that have been around a handful of years, reviewed this in its original entitlement application back probably in late 2020 or sometime in 2021. So a project was approved and there is an entitlement on this site. This is just an update to that entitlement. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time and walk through that context with the goal of getting you to what the ARC's purview is here tonight. So the site impacted by this text amendment is 6695 South Wasatch Boulevard. It's the northern 21.5 acre portion of the gravel pit property. The applicant here is Rockworth Companies, and they are the original applicant of the original entitlement as well. It's the same applicant. The impacted ordinance, ZTA stands for zoning text amendment. So this means they're coming in and proposing an amendment of an adopted city code. This one's interesting because the city code that they're amending, it only applies to this development site. And attached to that city code is their actual development plan. This is something that was created by the city's planned development district zoning ordinance. And what that ordinance does is create site-specific zones and site master plans that only apply and govern one specific property. It's kind of a custom-built zone and plan specific to this property. That ordinance is known as the PDD-2 or Wasatch Rock Redevelopment Ordinance. You can see this is a zoning map, that dark blue kind of turquoise color of the site. This is the only site that zoning exists in the city. It's the only site it ever will exist because it was a site-specific process. So here's some background. Back in 2019, the applicant applied for initial PDD-2 entitlement for this property. The PDD-2 zone was approved in 2021 after about 2 years of kind of public input process. This went through the ARC, this went through the Planning Commission, and ultimately was approved by the City Council. In addition to neighborhood meetings and a lot of technical review and that kind of thing. What that did was establish again, site-specific development ordinance, a written ordinance, as well as a master site plan governing this 21 acre property. During that initial entitlement phase, the PDD-2 zone included full site review and impact analysis by staff. A lot of site engineering was done and has subsequently continued to be completed on this site. And that process established approved uses, approved site layouts, conceptual landscaping plans, circulation plans, building massing, heights, densities, et cetera, for every use on the site except the one we're talking about tonight, which is the condominium building. At the end of the initial entitlement process, the condominium use and location was entitled, but the height and the massing was not. When the ARC looked at it as part of that process, the height and the massing was there. It wasn't until very late into the city council process where there were some additional questions raised. The applicant just removed the height and massing and said, we'll come back and go through that later. We just want to get the rest of this entitled and move forward. So in the ARC's previous review of this, what you're reviewing tonight is almost identical to what you reviewed and issued certificate of design compliance for back in 2020 or 2021.
Is there a reason the applicant did not want to do that at that time?
I think and I don't want to speak for them, they are here tonight. So after my presentation, you're welcome to invite them up, but it was 2 years in an entitlement process and, fairly last minute questions raised by those on the city council. And rather than wanting to spend more time going through that, said, let's get going with what we have. And we'll keep the use there. We'll just pull the density down and come back later.
Did the council want it to be higher or lower or?
I don't want to speak for the entire council. I know some on the council had just philosophical concerns about building heights in general. So I think, this is a fairly tall building and I think there was some concern over that. But we didn't get into it too much at that time, because the applicant just said, well, we'll just defer that. That's a later phase in the project and we'll come through that later. And that's what they're doing now. So when I say PDD, it means a couple different things. There is the city's plan development district, which is the ordinance that allows someone to come in and request one of these projects. Then there's the site-specific plan development zone. The PDD-2 is what was created through the city's plan development district process. And now we have a zoning text amendment, not of the city's PDD ordinance, but of the site-specific ordinance. I apologize to everyone that has sat through this presentation now 5 times in the last month. So this is just to show, this is what is approved today. So there is an entitlement in place today. There is a development plan, a written ordinance adopted, codified today. It has been since 2021. Just a quick overview of the development plan. What you see on screen is all approved. This is not part of the ARC's discussion or review tonight. This has already been through the process and received approval. But this is just an overview of what is in that development plan. There's a 7-story apartment building originally approved at 325 units, later reduced down to 300, just based on an angle of a fault line that cut through one of the corners of the building. 4 total buildings that are approved for retail commercial type use, 1 story each. It's hard to see here, but the lower, kind of the northwestern pads A and B, and then the central pads E and F are those 1-story retail buildings. There's 2 mixed use commercial buildings, pads C and D. You may remember, those of you that were on the ARC initially, there was a previous iteration where this was some taller office buildings. Through that initial review process, this was reduced down to the 2 or 3-story mixed use commercial buildings. And then there's a hotel, 5 stories, 140 rooms. And then in this northern location on the site, a condominium building where the use and the location were approved, the massing, height, and unit count are subject to this text amendment approval. Additional context here, much easier to see on the TV than on the projector screen. But you can see this is a site constraints map. On the very top, you've got the green shading, which is basically hillside and reclamation area. So steep slopes and areas that the applicant is actually now probably, maybe as we speak, working on reclamation activities and out there, fortifying that and revegetating that hillside. Then you've got the red dash lines, which are fault lines and offshoots of those fault lines. And then the kind of the pink area around those red dash lines are the fault setback zones for those faults. And then you've got the blue line that runs through the middle. That's a metropolitan water aqueduct easement and water line, that regional transmission grade water line that's huge that runs under that with a large easement surrounding that. This is all just context to show that how this development was sited and how the buildings were positioned were largely derived from where they could be located. You can kind of see they fill in the gaps where the hazards are not. One of the reasons this was approved in 2021 and is now just finally underway with reclamation is was a very technical engineering process to study and identify and provide mitigation for all these hazards, but it is underway now. On the left there is the concept landscaping plan that was approved for the overall site. This also kind of shows some of the site circulation elements pretty well. And then a phasing plan showing the different phases of the project. Phase 1 being the apartments, which you probably will actually see back fairly soon for specific site plan approval because they're getting ready to move forward with that. And then the condominium building, which we're talking about tonight, is actually phase 7, or the last phase of the project. So they're going through and trying to clean up the entitlement, but it's a few phases away from.
Is that sitting on the parking to the top there? The parking structure, is that a structure?
The condominiums?
No, yeah, the condominium.
Oh, the apartment, yes to both. Both residential projects have structured parking underneath.
And show again the condos, what is this in?
The condos are right there, and I've got some renderings here that'll show those a little better.
Oh, okay,
So you can see in a lot of these are the approved plans. You can see the red dashed line
Yeah.
along the condos. There's a note that just says
okay,
location and use approved, height and density subject to further approval, which is.
but the
where
big
we are.
parking structure, I assume,
Yep,
has
yep.
building on top of it later on?
All at once, but yes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So again, we're still in what was originally presented and approved. These were the initial visual renderings that were prepared, again, back in 2021. You may have seen these, or the ARC may have seen these at the time, that just show the various massings. These are not indicative of final design or architecture, but more just building massing and visual perspective there. So even in 2021, the condominium building, it was proposed with quite a bit of height and unit count, as it is proposed now. This is just to demonstrate that what we reviewed previously and what was brought to this commission previously is not drastically different than what's being
Yeah.
proposed again today. It was just what happened after it left the ARC purview last time that changed things a little bit. Again, just some more perspective renderings back from the original entitlement process. This is down by the old mill building, so a perspective looking up from down below. And then this is one that's kind of over by Porcupine, over by Fort Union across the way. That just shows the visual impact. Okay, so that's context. All of that you see, except for the visual renderings with the tall buildings, is approved today. It's entitled, we're not necessarily deliberating on that except for giving you context of what's on the books already. What they are now proposing, I'll skip some of this context again, is a text amendment of their site-specific ordinance to basically re-entitle or formally and fully entitle the condominium building in terms of height and unit count. Same location on the site, same very similar configuration as was previously reviewed by this body. How it ended up getting adopted was there was a provision, it was C, and that's what you'll read in the ordinance today, that basically says the ordinance approves the residential condominium use, but it's subject to additional approval. And then right in that, and this is why it's in front of you, it says when that additional approval request comes in, that has to go through Planning Commission, ARC, and City Council. It's been to Planning Commission, we've introduced it to City Council, but we have to hit that ARC step as well. So that's why we're here in front of you tonight. They are proposing then to entitle this condominium use for a project, a height between 9 to 10 floors of units, above 3 to 4 floors of parking. So 12 to 14 total stories proposed on this site. And then a unit count somewhere between 75 and 110 total units. They're proposing language that says developer to determine the final unit story parking level, unit count, and parking stall configuration in accordance with this subsection. So as that site comes online, they're proposing a little bit of flexibility in final story height and unit count. But that's kind of the big thing to consider, and what you're reviewing tonight is a proposed condominium building of 12 to 14 stories, 75 to 110 units. When the ARC initially looked at this, I think it was about 100 units and about 12 stories in height. So fairly similar in terms of scale and scope, nothing drastically different than what was already reviewed. The general footprint is shown on the right. I only note that to show there's a, you can see the fault hazard kind of clip a corner of that. They are proposing some design standards where the parking deck will be structurally separated from the habitable space there. And that will be largely a function of, structural engineering and design, and justifying through their design that they've mitigated the fault hazard there, and are allowed to locate the parking deck portion of that building within the fault zone. This is an updated visual render. So it looks very similar to what I showed you from before, but they did update this based on their new proposal. So you, again, get a sense of what the visual impact of that may be.
So the building the habitable part is stepped back off of the fault.
Yeah,
And then the front of the parking garage.
yeah, you
is
can,
On this side of the
you can
fault.
kind of see it right there.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a plateau there.
Interesting.
It's kind of an L shaped, the habitable space is a bit of an L shape
Okay.
back out here. Okay. Now
Yeah,
I messed
always.
up my presentation.
I mean, of course, the fault, the earthquake would happen right there on those fault lines, right?
Yeah, and there's substantial, I mean,
I know. it's-
dozens of studies and reports and reviews and engineering, I think they have 5 different engineering firms
I know.
looking at different angles of it.
And-
Very, very complicated.
And we, 20 feet away from it, it's okay. I mean, I'm with it, we all live on the fault line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, it better happen on those lines,
Maybe a little
Yeah.
parallel to the ARC's formal purview in this, a little beyond the scope of design and architecture, but we did do a new impact analysis. We presented this to the planning commission and the city council, so I'll go through this quick. We looked at building height and massing. The adjacent residential area to the north is actually outside of Cottonwood Heights boundaries. It's Holiday City, but we heard a number of public comments concerned about the height and the visual impact of the building. So we looked at that. The proposed condominium building is 450 to 500 feet away from the state route Wasatch Boulevard, which is how building height measurement is based in these PDD areas, especially in the gravel pit. It's based on the average elevation of the adjacent state highway known as Wasatch Boulevard. I only say it that way because there's a million roads that are named Wasatch Boulevard, but we're measuring from SR 190 out in front of the site. At that distance away from Wasatch Boulevard, the maximum building height allowed is between, it shifts, it jumps at 500 feet back, it jumps. So anything closer than 500 feet within kind of the zone they're in can be proposed up to 150 feet total in height. Beyond that, it can be proposed actually up to 300 feet.
So sorry.
Yeah, please.
Typically, when you talk about heights, there can be a relationship to the adjacent land uses, like in certain zones, commercial zones, it'll step up as you get a certain distance away from
Yeah.
single family residential.
Yep.
But you're saying that this zone has been written based on a proximity to the street, to the highway,
Yes.
with no limitation based off of the proximity to single family residential.
I think there are some general building setbacks from property lines that this would meet, it's 10 or 20 feet or something like that. But nothing that requires stepping or height or anything like that.
It seems a little unique that wouldn't have been.
It certainly is. The gravel pit, this and the larger gravel pit site is the only place in the city where this method of height measurement is allowed. So, there is an interface there with that northern residential area, but for the PDD area, tier 1, which is the gravel pit, it's all based on elevation above Wasatch Boulevard. Typically, our building heights are measured from, the starting grade of a property. I think when the PDD ordinance was originally adopted, that didn't make as much sense in the gravel pit because so much site grading and reclamation has to happen. The city adopted Wasatch Boulevard as the benchmark for that. The applicant's exhibit that I'll show in a minute shows a building height of 126 feet. The maximum height based on the proposed ordinance, which is that range of 12 to 14 stories, we calculated to be approximately 144 feet maximum. I will also note the planning commission, they unanimously recommended approval of this to the city council with a condition or a note that in no case shall the height exceed 150 feet total. The applicant is amenable to that. So we're operating under that of a maximum height here of 150 feet. Even though by ordinance, a good chunk of this building theoretically could be proposed up to, double that height. Some of the findings for supporting this proposed building height. admittedly, it is very unique for the city, but this site is also very unique for the city. The height proposed is much less than the maximum allowed. There's limited ability to modify or relocate the building footprint just due to the current entitlement, but also the site constraints. And then this building height and intensity is supported by the city's adopted Wasatch Boulevard master plan. And I have a few slides on that later on. Just so you see though, there's some elevations here. The top of the maximum height of that condominium building is roughly in line with the elevation of Gun Club Road about at that point. Gun Club Road climbs steeply west to east. So 49, I can't read it, I think 68 is the high point elevation that they provided for that building. And once you get up to the east to kind of that next chunk of homes up there, the roof of the condominium building is about even, with the grade level up there.
Do you know how high it is compared to the buildings across the
Yeah.
street?
Yep, so these are about 49, 15, so somewhere between 50 and 55 feet. There, I will note, there's only two homes there that have direct access onto Gun Club Road. And then, those homes are, there's a lot of slope between the condo building and the property line, and then a 40-foot right of way, and then a 30-foot setback to that house. So there is quite a bit of buffer distance between the building, the proposed condominium building, and the closest, most impacted adjacent residents. That being said, yes, you will see a building, to a certain extent stick out of the ground here. Based on these measurements, about a third of that building is mitigated by the slope and kind of tucked in there. And part of this building will be used as retention for the slope in this area. So that I think, the applicant is attempting here to kind of set that in and dig it into the hillside as much as possible, but there is a visual impact. This is the exhibit that's actually in the city's ordinance that governs building height. So you can see this is how it derives height based on distance from Wasatch Boulevard. The theory is the further away you are from Wasatch Boulevard, the higher the building can be proposed. The condominium building is right here, and you can see we're right on the threshold of the 150-foot line and the 300-foot line. Where the applicant has accepted the condition of, no higher than 150 feet total, they are within that, that maximum height and actually well under, again, what they could have proposed in this area. We just did, a full impact analysis here. They did an initial traffic study. I won't go too much into this, but we compared the uses they assessed and their methodology in that initial traffic study with what it is now. And because the old traffic study made some different assumptions, they assumed some senior living units. They also assumed 100 condominium units in that study. The senior living units don't exist anymore. Some of the commercial square footage has gone up marginally. The condominiums are back, but 110 units maximum is not drastically different than 100 units. Bottom line is, after reviewing that with the city engineer, we didn't find the need to require them to update that traffic study. Their original findings, as far as traffic studies go, are still acceptable.
So, maybe come back a little later when we were talking about, they have an access, a tough one right off of Wasatch there,
Yeah,
but which makes it pretty difficult. But the vision is, obviously to have this boulevard
Yeah.
going through
correct.
the other, right?
Yeah.
And there'll be another access point. So most likely, at least 50 or more % of traffic will come in on somebody else's property, but it is gonna be, I don't know if it's a private road or it's a public road in the future.
Yeah,
But I mean, when we were studying that site, it was so important to get a continuous boulevard through it.
Yep.
That is connected, so it isn't seen as slivers of
Correct.
project, right?
yeah. So you
And
can
so, I
see
mean,
here.
in my book, you're not gonna have that many traffic on that north end.
Here.
You're gonna have it coming in the middle on somebody else's property. and then joining in.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So the initial access will be off of the, you know, kind of the Holiday or Cottonwood Heights Holiday version of Wasatch Boulevard.
Yeah, but.
And that'll exist until whatever point in
Yeah.
time the larger gravel pit project comes in online. But you can see that, you know, the cul-de-sac there is meant
Yeah,
to step
and
into that
I
project.
saw that, and that's important that that is intended to keep going.
I do want to note here that intersection, back in 2021 was actually proposed to be fully reconfigured to a formal kind of three-way intersection. There was some pushback from, residents of Holiday and city officials in Holiday. So we worked with the city to try to be responsive to some of those concerns. And where that went is rather than reconfigure that whole intersection, we have left the Wasatch Boulevard alignment as it is today. So the project access will kind of be a drive access off of that rather than squaring that all up. It doesn't work quite as efficiently as the original reconfigured intersection. I just want to note that was agreed to by the applicant and agreed upon by the city council at the time to try to address some of the concerns we are hearing from Holiday City.
It's not gonna be a light there, is there?
No,
Be a stop sign.
yeah, it's stop controlled only leaving this site.
It is a tough intersection.
Yeah.
and We ride our bikes right there. I mean, they know that.
Yeah,
It's a tough one, but that's why hopefully this is gonna be access from Wasatch
sure.
with
Yeah.
by a stoplight. You know, eventually, I would hope so. I know there's a fight over that, but
Yeah, yeah.
you gotta have that.
And then just in the interim, there's the kind of the existing driveway that accesses that ski shop off of SR 190 today
Mhm.
is meant to be an emergency access point.
Yeah.
You know, not a typical entry and exit to the site, but allowing for emergency vehicle access if needed. We reassessed just the kind of status of the geotech and geologic hazards on the site. We contract with Geostrata to provide those technical review services. In essence, there have been a lot of studies done. We know generally where the hazards are located, and we know generally what the applicant is proposing to mitigate those hazards. And then the way the ordinance is written is that as each phase comes forward with building permit application, they will go do site-specific trenching at the exact, you know, building footprint of where they're proposing to build and further clear, you know, any hazards where that building's located. There's another line in the ordinance that says if they find something unexpected that drastically impacts their ability to build what's approved, they have to come back through this amendment process for that portion.
On that map that we were just looking at,
Yeah,
could you tell me what the green is again?
the hillside. Yep,
And they cannot build on the hillside. right?
correct. That's all being reclaimed. There's a public trail system that's being developed on that hillside, but that's correct. The last thing I'll touch on here, actually a couple more things. The Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan, this is just a policy document that was part of staff's basis for supporting a unique building like this at this site. When that Wasatch Boulevard Master Plan was done, it looked at the whole Wasatch Boulevard corridor for transportation and land use and recreation and all kinds of different things. Where that netted out and the ultimate recommendation was made that it said rather than explore and support drastic redevelopment along the entire Wasatch Boulevard corridor, redevelopment efforts should be focused more intensely at the gravel pit site. So that plan, that adopted plan actually has language in it that supports higher density, kind of urban style design within the gravel pit site. There's some precedent images here that kind of show the scale of what that could look like. So a lot of that language is supportive of a building that's a little unique in terms of what else you see in Cottonwood Heights, supportive of a building that's this kind of size and intensity. And that's also backed by the actual planned development district ordinance that kind of takes the lid off of maximum allowed heights. You know, a big part of that is so much of that site is a scar, and you can kind of visually obscure that with development. And from a traffic standpoint, this is right off of I-215. There's not a lot of direct traffic impact, even to the Holiday neighborhood coming into and out of this site, because that Holiday neighborhood has to go up and around, you know, into their neighborhood. So this is kind of a unique area of the city, and the plans and ordinances address it as such. Very quickly, I'm going to just switch, see if that switches. Nope. Oh, it did. Okay. When the Architecture Review Commission originally considered this, obviously at the master development plan stage of it, everything's conceptual. They don't have exact building elevations and materials and details like that. They presented and I think this was approved by the ARC, a general design guidelines document that guides design standards for this site. And those were attached to your packet. I'll just kind of scroll through these here. It talks about, you know, sustainable building practices, design principles, and themes, and kind of establishes this mountain modern aesthetic. You know, it's pretty broad, but this is what was kind of packaged in with that master site plan at the time. So that's there. And then the last thing I'll touch on is the ARC's role. Certainly you have a role in this stage of the process. You have a very direct role, more direct than any other board or commission with the city as each phase comes online. So I've gone and highlighted the relevant sections here of their ordinance that involve the ARC. So site plans for each phase, which is not this, but as each phase comes online, site plans, subdivision plats, densities, building heights, massing, site layouts, et cetera, not only have to conform to this code, but each phase shall be reviewed and approved by the city, including ARC review and approval of the site plan for that phase to ensure compliance with this ordinance. So as each phase comes in for building permit approval, it doesn't go to planning commission, it doesn't go to city council, it's not just approved by staff, it comes to ARC to make sure that they're developing in accordance with the approved development plan, but also that they're coming in and giving you more detail on the architectural standards and the landscaping and the circulation elements for the site. Just a few other sections here. I touched on this. Any substantial change from what's approved as they come in and do site-specific work has to go through the full amendment process. And I got a couple more here. Pedestrian circulation is noted specifically as requiring ARC review during each phase that comes forward to verify compliance with what was approved in the overall PDD2 zone, which is continuous 8-foot wide sidewalks along the main roads, sidewalks along private streets, basically making sure that they follow what was entitled originally. Same thing with landscaping. You'll look at site-specific landscaping as part of each phase as that comes online. You will also look at the hillside trail as that is designed and formalized as that comes online. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything.
Is that been approved by going above Walker's property or?
It stubs into it. And the idea is as that continues, then that is potential future connectivity into a Bonneville Shoreline Trail system or something like that.
Okay,
Signage also comes through the ARC, and then the environmentally sustainable design practices that they've noted they're going to use is verified and double checked by the ARC as each phase comes through. So we're not at that level for the condominium building yet, but that is just to note, they don't obviously have final structural plans or architecture elevations for the condominium building at this point. That's not the purpose of the text amendment, but they will come back in with that later on. So your purview tonight is to review just the nature of the text amendment, the 12 to 14 story, 75 to 110 unit building within the context of everything that's already been improved and within your role as the Architecture Review Commission. Okay, that was a lot of talking. Happy to answer any questions you have and turn the time back to you.
Thank you. Invite the applicant if they would like to make any comments or remarks at this point, or feel like it was
Come on up
covered
if you
okay.
want.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Nice to see
Good to
some
have
of
you
you
here.
again. Good to meet those of you who are here new. My name is Tom Henroyd and this is Jake Parkin from Rockworth Companies. Overall, I think we'd just like to express our deep gratitude for Mike. He has done this many times, as you can tell. Very educated on our project, and hearing him go through it, I'm very impressed at how much he has digested. As he mentioned, it's It's a difficult site, has a bunch of constraints, but I think he's mentioned, and we agree, it's an extremely unique site, not just for Cottonwood Heights, but really for the state of Utah. It's the gateway to our canyons. We do feel the weight of responsibility for doing a very good job. And making sure that both use, density, massing, and certainly architectural style and execution, it's got to be first rate. And so we take that very seriously. We're super excited to be at the stage that we are. It's been hard getting here, but I think that hard has done a couple of things. I think it's actually protected us because of all of the engineering and expertise, both from the private side from us and from the public side from Cottonwood Heights. I also think it's helped us get a better product. I think the architecture that was submitted to you all back when we got the PDD originally approved, the so-called Mountain Modern, we obviously intend to stick with that and those precedent images that were submitted to you. That's what we want. This building in particular, yes, it's true that there isn't a current architectural design, but it's going to be, like Mike said, between, call it 125 and 140 feet tall. That means it will be built with concrete and steel. It will have a heavy concrete, steel, and glass elements. It's going to be a beautiful building, and it needs to stand the test of time. And we think it's appropriate in this location. We heard all of the comments from the Holiday residents, and certainly we're sensitive to those. But we do still think it's appropriate. And I also would add, we do believe there is a natural break geographically between Canyon Cove and our property. That Gun Club Road, actually, it's a ridge. If you drive up there right now, you'll see we're creating the new grade, the new old grade right now, putting the mountain back the way that it was before the gravel pit excavated it all. And you'll note, I mean, it comes down pretty steep. So there is a pretty big break. Yes, there will be some impacts to some of those homes for sure. But I think I would also add the footprint of that building. It's not that large. We're probably talking about 8 units is probably about what will be located on each floor. And those units are going to be 1,600 to 2,600 square feet. Probably these are not massive units. We do think they're going to be beautiful. They're going to be in high demand. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, but we appreciate you listening to us. Appreciate your formal review in addition to this one. So any questions you guys have, we're happy to answer.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the ARC? Or comments?
Well, and to comment you on it, I kind of go by it every day, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
We all do, and kind of wondering where we saw all the dirt.
Yeah.
Just tell me what you do with that dirt. Are they crushing it up and mixing it? Is that what they're doing to do it over and over
To
again?
create the highest quality product we can get.
I mean, they have turned that dirt over 3 times
No, you got it. That's
to make it a topsoil.
Jake's job is basically stand there, fold his arm and make sure they're doing their job right. That's what he's doing up there. But no, you're right. It's a former gravel pit, and
Yeah,
that's it's actually an advantage being a former gravel pit and being next to a gravel pit.
yeah.
And so, yes, there's crushing that's ongoing, and it's all to create a product that the city spec will accept.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's been very impressive how you handled all that dirt. And so, yeah, with the units, 1,600 to 2,500, I mean, that's big units. That's 2-3 bedroom units, and
Yes, sir.
you're looking for family units and,
Yeah, they will be higher end for
Yeah.
certain.
Yeah.
And potentially a fair amount of them, second homes,
Okay.
retreat type things,
Luxury.
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe 2 bedrooms with an office or den study type of
Yeah.
a situation.
No, I mean, I feel it's very appropriate. I mean, I always talked about that side needs height.
Yep.
you can't put five-story stuff in there, you know. So I think we're gonna see, 10, 20-story buildings in there. And particularly towards the hillside. So I think you're starting with something that is, I know there's been a lot of discussion early on and in opposition to height, that it was just supposed to be, low, but it can't be, it has to be height. But that's just a question, what the market can really carry. Is there room for that much, condominium apartments?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that too. There is very little condominium construction across our country because it's relatively difficult. We have some great examples of some condominiums in our community here locally that have been very successful. And it's not that many units, like, where I think we're at 80, we're between 80 and 90 units when all is said and done on this design. And if you go into Holiday around our project there at Murray Holiday Road and 2300 East, a lot of that condominium development spawned from that project. And those are all very high end. Their purchase prices are, 1 million on up to $2 million. And they're similar in size to what I was just discussing. And we certainly feel like this location is superior. It's going to be a fantastic spot to have a place like this.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, thank you.
I think, I'll just comment. I think it makes a lot of sense to have the height there. I really appreciate how you've stepped the buildings back. I appreciate the fact that you're tucking it down into that hillside there. And I really like just the sensitivity to it. I know it's a very, very difficult site. A lot of constraints, probably one of the most constrained sites I've ever seen. And I think you're doing a good job.
Well, thank you. We appreciate this entire community. Your commission, your council, certainly your staff couldn't have done it without all of you.
Well, I mean, it's the only really high density the city has. There's no other place really for that. And there's an appropriate place. And there's an appropriate place for a 2,000-3,000 car parking structure to feed the canyons. I mean, I hope somebody puts that together. Because it's such a natural to dig it into the hill like you have, 3, 4, 5 stories, bury it, that you can't do anyway, and build on top, right? And then get all the skiers to park there and take buses out.
We're really excited for that part too. So you let us know how that goes.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see that. Just a side note, I mean, I know we have, with Canyon Racket, with that development. I mean, is anybody really parking? I mean, the city is supposed to have a chunk of that. I know it's kind of gone sideways, but I never hear anybody ever park in there or know they even can.
It's really well designed to be hidden. So yeah, that's been a push to get people to use that public parking.
I mean, if it's done right on the other side, it's sort of, I mean, hopefully you can keep developing. Are you planning on that? Going south?
We would be happy to. Well, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, by the way, I mean, they are shutting down this year. Right?
We hear that, I mean, you see most of that mountain is gone.
They got rid of
a lot
all
of that
the,
activity. It's off of the
asphalt.
site,
There's no
but
asphalt material anymore.
There might be some processing activity going on, but the full mining has really tailed off.
Yeah, anyway.
So with that, I could use a motion.
Sorry, I didn't have any more for the applicant, but I did want to just
Sure.
verify some of these
Yes.
heights a little
Of course.
bit with staff.
Yeah.
I just want to be consistent. I think that I was just going back through the tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 of the different PDD zones. And the tier 2 does have language that requires when you're within 50 feet of a residential zone, you have to be below, you can only go up to 30 feet within 50 feet.
Yeah.
And then once you're outside of 50 feet, you can go up to 50
to
feet,
50 feet.
which I recognize we're not in tier one and we're not in, or sorry, I get those backwards.
Tier two.
We're not in tier two and we're not in tier three. We're in tier one, which is different.
Yep.
But I'm just wanting to verify that we're being somewhat consistent with the way that tier two and tier three step when it's next to a single family residential zone. And I think we are. I mean, I'm trying to do like quick math of like diagramming the heights. But you mentioned a couple elevations on a previous slide. And you also mentioned that we're 75 feet away from that single family residential zone,
You know, approximately there, because there's the whole Gun Club Road right of way.
right?
I'm assuming that's a 40 to 50 foot total right of way. And then that house has a conventional residential setback of 25 or, 30 feet. And then the condo building is not right across from it. It's, diagonal down the hill a little way. So it picks up another good bit of setback at that point.
Yeah,
So all in all, yeah, I don't know the exact measurement from corner of the building to the front door of the house, but it's pushing,
But we're-
60, 70 feet.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We're outside of that 50-foot boundary
Yeah,
safely, that tier two and tier three would recognize as that limiting area or zone that you have to stay below a certain height.
from door to building, yes, it's done. Admittedly, the tier one is a unique, it is completely different than tier two and
Right.
tier three, but yes, there's still, it's not like this is coming up and the front door of the building
Yeah.
is right next to it. There is quite a bit of space.
And I'm thinking from like those property lines of the single family residential
Mhm.
to the north to the condo itself,
Yeah,
we're at least, we're outside that 50-foot zone.
I would guess we are. I don't have the exact measurements. I don't want to
Yeah,
guarantee that, but yeah,
and
pretty close.
and then if you take the finished floor elevation of, say, that upper house, the house, the brown one,
That one or this one?
no, that one.
That one?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then the top of the roof of the condo,
Mm-hmm.
are we less than, what is that difference between?
Well, it depends on the final build height, but based on
Within
the
the
information they
150.
provided the red line there is about 50 feet below the top of the condominium building.
Okay.
So when you get to the floor of that house, Gun Club Road climbs sharp, so it's even a little higher, so 50 or less.
So, so I just want to make sure I heard that right. So from that house is, from
So the roadway elevation of Gun Club.
Yeah.
At this
at that
red
yellow,
line
at that red line.
is about 50 feet below the top of the condominium building.
Okay,
So the
If you
top
go
of the
over,
house-
You have to go up 50 feet to hit the roof. Once you get up here at Gun Club, which is about the finished floor elevation of these houses. Then you walk out of those houses and you're level with the top of the condominium building.
got it. So tier two and tier three allow you to go up to 50 feet. Once you're 50 foot outside of, away from that single family zone.
With other, and to get that 50 foot in those areas, you have to have ground floor commercial and all these
Yeah.
other kind of things. Tier two is really geared towards the major, like the Fort Union Boulevard intersections. So 23rd, Highland, Fort Union. The only place we've implemented that is actually back on the very west end of the city, back behind where the city offices used to be, kind of tucked into that residential area. There was a tier two project approved there at that.
And I remember it had to step,
And what they did was it's only from single family residential. There was
Right.
only one of those, so they just put their parking lot next to that. The
right?
buildings are next to the other multifamily in that area.
I mean, I agree with everything Nils and Scott have said. I do think this is the right place for density. I do think that it would be good to be able to say that we're being consistent with the other ways that we're treating how a PDD zone touches single family residential. And it seems like we're outside that 50-foot boundary. I mean, it's not like we're within the 50-foot boundary, which tier 2 and tier 3 limit. So in that way, we are being consistent.
Yeah, there's, I mean, there's geographic and the actual linear, buffer there.
Yeah,
Again, you will see that building.
I recognize
I
that.
mean, it's a big building, but it's kind of a unique site, so that's.
So if you could go to the image, the rendering. So if I had my preference, I would take the taller building and push it to the right. And have some taller areas there. However, if you go to the site constraints map,
No, I recognize it.
I just want this for the record.
Okay,
If you go to the site constraints map, there's no way you can move that apartment building over because of all of the constraints, the water line, the fault lines, et cetera. And so when I look at what they're doing relative to trying to make the site work with all of its constraints, and the fact that they've taken that building and they've tucked it in and pushed it down, I feel like it's responsive to the site and it's respectful of its surroundings. That said, I am concerned about, if I had bought the homes that you were talking about, I want a view of the city and I'm gonna lose part of that view because of the building there. But I do think that they're being as responsive as they can on a really, really difficult site.
yeah,
And I think the constraints on the site warrant consideration.
understood. I could also see a condition being applied of taking a couple of the floors on the north side and having those put on the south side so that the building steps up as it goes away from the single family residential. That's not an uncommon request. I recognize it makes potentially for a good, maybe a less desirable architectural building, but that's a common way of addressing proximity to single family residential, is that you have to step away from that.
So the building needs to come back before you.
Correct.
Correct.
This is just, an envelope, basically, now a vertical envelope, because the horizontal one's been established. So the full design would come back to you, down the road when they're at that phase.
So one thing I would encourage the applicant to note is our concern with that and to consider that as you develop your architecture.
To consider stepping the elevation of the building.
From Gun Club Road towards the southeast, towards the south.
But that would mean you would take 2 floors out, add 2 floors, so in past 150 feet then.
Would we be higher? We would be higher than
Yeah.
150 feet?
Yeah.
I mean,
Which I wouldn't mind. The farther you go
no, I
south,
agree
I
with
think you can get higher.
But the people over there, how many houses are there is impacted? I mean,
It's like 2 houses, 3
Yeah,
houses.
visually, I mean, you're gonna see any change. You're gonna see the small buildings from these houses
Yeah.
on the site. There are some houses, some condos or something, they're set in there. If I can show you.
but
Well, the other thing to look at is those homes. There aren't windows on that side.
So there's these homes here, they are set
that's
in
what I'm
and
saying, yeah,
the backyard is, I mean, they're down in a hole and
Yeah.
facing the other way.
right.
I don't
Yeah,
see a huge impact
their
there.
view is not south.
There is-
like northwest,
There's one
Or
property, I would
looking-
say predominantly that has their front door on Gun Club Road. They're gonna be most visually impacted.
yeah,
From a site impact standpoint, they're actually, there's no interrelationship between Gun Club at that point and
yeah.
the site, other than that view to the southwest.
Yeah, I mean, the view is really out this way, but anyway, so, but that's really academic at this point.
It
We have
is.
allowed the location to use and the height.
Well, we're determining the height right now.
Well, yeah,
but,
we haven't,
Yeah,
well,
The council ultimately will determine the
yeah,
height.
yeah,
The planning commission has recommended just a cap at 150 feet
Right.
maximum.
I would even be open to a average of 150 feet if the applicant found that, you know, stepping was okay with the pro forma and everything. And if you stepped down as you're closer to the single family and then step
Sure.
up away from the single family, because the overall height doesn't bother me. It's just trying to be consistent with how zoning treats PDD zones next to other types of zones. And I don't think it's appropriate to use the specific house designs and existing conditions, because we're really talking about property that could change over time. That those parcels, the house in the future could face another way. It could be different, but the zone is about making sure that we're having this zone react to this zone in an appropriate way.
So this is rough. I don't know exactly on this image where the condo is gonna land, but it's somewhere in this ballpark. That distance from front door to, you know, that point of the hillside is 167 feet.
Hmm.
So just to give you an idea of the scale there.
If I may, I totally understand the concern and I can appreciate the idea of stepping the building as it goes east. It's just not a very big building to create steps in.
yeah,
So that's probably my number one concern. My number two concern is, the planning commission, I think they wanted to be sensitive to a lot of the comments that were coming from holiday residents, which is why they said, yeah, if these guys moved the building just a hair, they can go 300. And we said, you know what, we're not gonna move it a hair though. We'll stick within 150. And I worry about them feeling like, oh, well, now you're going back to the council, you're making changes and now it's 170 feet. I'm concerned a little bit about that. And, you know, the comments that we made to the holiday residents, I realize this sounds like an oversimplification. However, I do think zooming out and looking at the big picture is worth it. We're trying to say, folks, for about 70 years, this has been either a gravel pit or an asphalt and concrete recycling project. And it's now going to have restaurants and retail. It's going to look like our holiday project on that west side. It's going to have mixed use buildings, fun places to eat. We're excited about the possibilities there as well. I mean, I'm sharing with you guys as Cottonwood Heights residents, we're going to be very picky about the users that will be occupying these buildings. And we think that we're going to make a splash. There's going to be out of town restaurants that aren't here yet. There's going to be interest from fun retailers, fun places to frequent. We already have interest from a lot of folks, but we've called timeout and, let us get the important things out of the way first. So we've really tried to focus on the big picture of just general massive improvement. Obviously walkers have to do what they have to do too. We're a fraction of their site, and hopefully they put together a really awesome plan too. And then everyone just feels really great about this entrance to Cottonwood Heights. So
I mean, the two houses have garages facing the condo. Like, there's nothing inside, it looks to me like, their view is really to the northwest. And
if I was being,
Is
if
that
I
two
was wearing the other
driveways right
shoe, I probably think the thing that I'd be most concerned about is just the shadow. I think that's probably what I would, there's no shadow now and
The view today is not that great. So, I mean, to me,
Yeah.
a nice development is gonna be a major improvement.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
It-
from property line to property line, that little span there is 78 feet, just to give you a sense. I
Yeah.
don't know if that helps, but
well,
I agree with everything you said. I'm very excited about this development. I think that you're doing the right thing. I'm more
consistency.
talking in terms of consistency and
Totally
how
understand.
I really think it might have been better in the beginning to have a height not only dictated off of Wasatch Boulevard, but also off of the single family residential.
So Chairman, I move that we propose proposal for us to vote on.
So you move for a certificate of design compliance as proposed.
That sounds much more technical. That's good. And it's written right here. So you go ahead.
I'll
Okay.
second.
So we have a proposal from Nils and a second. Any other comments or discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Um,
Any opposed? So we have 3 in favor and 1 opposed. Which for the record is Jesse. With that, the motion passes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
With that, I need a motion for approval of the minutes per the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the minutes per the consent agenda.
Perfect.
Just a reminder of how that works. We pre-approve the minutes for tonight's meeting and then you'll get a copy of them.
Yeah, and then we can,
Yep.
yeah.
If anybody has any questions or concerns, you can raise them, and once everybody's in agreement, then they're approved.
Okay.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Did we have a second for that?
I second.
There it is.
A little backwards, but all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, with that, I need a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 24th, 2025, pending business items.
We'll probably be back looking at the apartment building for this, that site specific review, because they've submitted for a permit application now. Thank you, everybody.
I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Let's
Thank
go.
you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes unanimously.
We got
I
it.
appreciate it. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
All right. This project might keep you guys busy for a while as it comes online.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
So you actually,
Exciting to see
every,
some stuff.
every building would have